for a new world order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of election, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's live broadcast. It is June 24th, 2013, and I have another jam-packed broadcast for you tonight. I had a bunch of stuff I wanted to go over, but I'm going to sidetrack about half of it to get back into the Iraq War again and actually cover some stuff that I've gone over before. Some of the older listeners, even some of the newer Unbound listeners now, might recognize some of the stuff that I'll be bringing up tonight, but I'm going to be going over it again because it needs to be told, because as much as it's admitted that it's happened, people still say, no. That's false. That's lies. You're lying. You're disrespecting the dead. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about exposing war crimes in Iraq. So, some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about tonight, you'll be hearing. And then I'm going to be getting into a few other things. Hour two, I'll be covering the new Xbox One. Why would I cover the Xbox One? What, are you going to give us a review, Popeye, of video games? No. I'm not going to give you a review of any video games. The Xbox One is spying on you. It's an NSA spy platform, basically. Remember, it's created by Microsoft. And Microsoft worked with the NSA when they designed Windows 7. I don't think they didn't have backdoors on any of the other versions of Windows either, but they openly worked with the NSA on Windows 7. So I don't think that the new Xbox wouldn't have spying capabilities. So we'll be getting into that too. But first, I want to take some time and I want to expose a few things that went on during the Iraq War. Now, everybody, I'm sure, would like to know why this came up again. Well, another Iraq War veteran wrote a rather open letter he left to his family. His name's Daniel Summers. If you were listening to Joe Joseph's broadcast, you might have heard him read the letter. And his letter sounds extremely familiar to the stories that I've heard from many other veterans. My friends. So, it inspired me to expose this stuff again. I'm going to read his letter. I'm going to read a letter from another guy named PFC John Needum. I'm going to let you hear audio, evidence of war crimes, and more. It's to come out, no matter how ugly it is. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So, diving right into the Iraq War atrocities. First and foremost, again, this came up because a young man named Daniel Summers, Operation Iraqi Freedom, veteran, and he was a part of a tactical human intelligence team in Baghdad, Iraq, and he's worked with the JSOC while he was over there, Joint Special Operations Command. So this kid obviously witnessed some horrific stuff, and he even says it in his letter, in which I'll read it aloud for you all to hear. But he witnessed some horrific stuff, and because of the things that he witnessed, he took his own life because he could never come to grips with it. And when I read the letter, it's pretty deep. Now, this story is repeated every day, over and over and over and over and over again. I mean, I don't know how many times I could play the audio on air of veterans telling what they saw, what they witnessed. And there's always one moron. Oh, they're just being pussies. Really? Okay, tough guy. Because you obviously weren't there, right? But you're all gung-ho. Don't speak about it and talk crap about the people that are coming out and exposing this stuff unless you were there. And if you were there and you say, well, I didn't see it, well, then good for you. Just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it's not there and not happening. Can you physically see the air you breathe? No. But you know it's there because if it wasn't there, you'd be dead. So, just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Anyway, I want to play some audio for you really quick first. Before I read his letter, I want to play you some audio from something else. Another case of this, exposing war crimes and what it did to somebody. This is, and I've talked about this guy before, his name's PFC John Needum. I'm going to play just a small piece of audio really quick so you can hear what he went through and what he witnessed, and then I'm going to read Summers' letter. You tell me if you see anything that sounds similar. Here we go.
This time is when I spoke to John the most about what happened in Iraq. He was receiving treatment, psychiatric treatment, physical treatment, and I started talking to him, and this is when he confided in me about the war atrocities that were being committed by the 212. I talked to Andrew Pagani about it immediately, and Andrew informed me that John was obligated by international law and U.S. law to inform the Army about that. That if he did not inform the Army, he would be found complicit and could be prosecuted as if he was a perpetrator. John wrote a letter to the Inspector General, Secretary of the Army, Commanding General of Fort Carson, a long list of very high-up people, and described in that letter some of the atrocities that he saw, and included photographs, which I obtained from Iraq, from some of the soldiers that were still there, and made them aware of the atrocities.
The following are excerpts from his letter dated December 18th, 2007, with some photographs he included. Be forewarned, these photographs are extremely graphic and disturbing.
My name is John Needum.
He begins telling how he served in Iraq from October 2006 to October 2007, and that he rejoined the 212 unit in Al-Dura in March of 2007. Then he tells some of what he witnessed.
In March of 2007, I witnessed a staff sergeant shoot and wound an Iraqi national without cause or provocation. The staff sergeant said he suspected the Iraqi to be a trigger man. We had not been attacked, and we found no evidence on the man to support the suspicion. As the Iraqi lay bleeding on the ground, a private requested to administer first aid to the Iraqi. The staff sergeant said no, let him bleed out. When the staff sergeant walked away, two privates went to the Iraqi, dragged him into an alley, and applied first aid. They then drove him to the cache for further treatment. In June of 2007, the first sergeant caused an Iraqi male to be stopped, questioned, detained, and killed. We had no evidence that the Iraqi was an insurgent or a terrorist. In any event, When we stopped him, he did not pose a threat. Although I did not personally witness the killing, I did observe the first sergeant dismembering the body and parading it while tied to the hood of a Humvee around the Mahalla neighborhood, while the interpreter blurred out warnings in Arabic over the loudspeaker. I have a photo that shows the first sergeant removing the victim's brains. In another occasion, an Iraqi male was stopped by a team as he walked down an alleyway. The Iraqi was detained and questioned with his hands tied behind his back. The sergeant skinned his face. The first sergeant shot a young Iraqi teenager who was about 16 years old. The shooting was unprovoked, and the Iraqi posed no threat to the unit. He was merely riding his bicycle past an ambush site. When I arrived on the scene, I observed the first sergeant, along with the staff sergeant, dismember the boy's body. In August of 2007, I responded to a radio call from a sergeant reporting that he had just shot an Iraqi who was trying to enter through a hole that the platoon had blown in a wall to allow them observation of an area during a security patrol. When I arrived, I saw a one-armed man who was still alive lying on the barricade. The man was about 30 years old. He had an old Ruger pistol hanging from his thumb. It was obvious to me that the pistol was placed there because of the way it was hanging from his thumb. The Iraqi was still alive when I arrived. I saw the sergeant shoot him twice in the back with hollow point bullets. The Iraqi was still moving. I was asking why they shot him again, and I heard the sergeant say, "He's moving. He's still alive." A specialist then moved to the Iraqi and shot him in the back of the head. The staff sergeant and sergeant were terribly excited about the kill. I saw them pull the Iraqi's brains out as they placed them in the body bag. The captain must have learned something about this incident because he was very upset and admonished the NCOs involved. On many occasions, I observed the staff sergeant and sergeants beat and abuse Iraqi teenagers, some as young as 14, without cause. They would walk into a house near areas where they suspected we had received sniper fire, then detained and beat the kids.
John's letter went on to say that when he refused to participate in the atrocities, that members of his own unit began to harass him. He requested transfer out of Fort Carson for his own safety.
The Army did not respond quickly. Some time went by, and John was still in San Diego. We're getting close to the end of December, and we still was a little bit iffy on what they were going to try to do with him. So I wrote a letter to Major General Graham at Fort Carson, and basically in the letter I asked him for the permission to reassign John to Balboa Naval Hospital for his treatment. And I based that on some of the things he experienced from the 212, and the fact that we were afraid that if he ever returned to the 212 that he may not survive it.
All Army charges against John were dropped, and Michael's request was approved.
And this is at the end of December that we got the approval, and he was evaluated, and finally, after a number of meetings with the medical staff at Balboa Naval, it was apparent John was not able to return to duty, and that he was disabled from his wounds. So he went through a medical board and was medically discharged honorably on July 18th of 2008.
Having finally reached safety, John had at last been able to inform high-ranking officials of the atrocities in Eldora in hopes that justice would prevail. Less than 6 weeks after his release from Balboa Naval Hospital, naked and with blood running from cuts on his neck and head, John was arrested for the tragic killing of his then-girlfriend, Jackie Villagomez. John said he had no recall of the incident. The soldier who had paid so dearly for refusing to participate in atrocities was now in jail for murder. He was jailed for 10 months without medication or treatment until his family was able to make bail. John collapsed and died unexpectedly on February 19, 2010, following outpatient treatment by the VA. The circumstances of his death remain under investigation.
It's interesting to me that the Department of Defense, the Department of the Army can spend unlimited amount of money to invade a country, pay for any weapons, expend $1 million missiles without thinking, but they won't fund any type of recovery programs for the soldiers that come back. They don't do that because they don't even recognize the issue. What I've seen in my experience, both with my brother and my son, is lip service. I've seen basically, and on first-hand basis, and particularly with my son in the 212, there's military commanders that basically say anybody that exhibits that kind of behavior comes from a bad family, they were a bad egg before they came in, the Army didn't teach them how to do that, and it's just all BS. It's just all BS, and I don't understand why they won't take care of their soldiers. The motto of the Army is no soldier left behind, and they're leaving them behind left and right. John was one of them.
Military authorities have not answered the photographic and written evidence of John's experience with meaningful action. The dark road that led to torture was never the work of merely a few bad apples. The Bush administration went to great lengths to blur the definition of torture, and neither Congress nor the Obama administration has honored their obligation to investigate and prosecute war crimes.
I don't believe that anybody is above the law. On the other hand, I also have a belief that we need to look forward as opposed to looking backwards.
When war crimes are revealed only to be overlooked and the whistleblower smoked or jailed, the rule of law has been lost. As this video goes out, the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act has been passed into law. This act may allow for the indefinite detention of anyone in the world, including Americans, that are merely suspected of being associated with terrorism.
See what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Do you see what this lawlessness in the name of fighting terror for over 10 years has caused and created throughout the world? Now, that's just some of the war crimes. That's just a little bit. That's just a little excerpt, a tiny little sliver, a tiny little excerpt of the stuff that goes on. And that's just one case. Again, this was PFC John Needum. I'm going to have to spend probably another day airing this again. It was a documentary I aired the audio from over a year ago. Probably about 2 years ago now. I was talking about John's case. And I contacted the filmmaker, and I got her permission to air the thing in its entirety on air. And it's back in my archives, but for the unbound listeners, you need to hear his whole story and what he went through, because he wouldn't partake in the war crimes and the things that were going on. They tortured him. His own unit in the Army, his own command in the Army, literally tortured this kid, physically and mentally, because he would not partake in war crimes and because he was having a hard time dealing with the things that he was being forced to witness. I mean, you heard him talk about how his first sergeant was scooping the brains out of a dead Iraqi. You should see the photos. I mean, there's photos that go right along with what he's saying, and when he tells you what you hear him say verbally, his verbal testimony, it matches 110% up to the photos, let me tell you. If you go over to federaljack.com, I have the whole thing there with his whole letter, the full letter in its entirety up there. It's just go in the search bar and look up On the Dark Side in Eldora, or War Crimes Exposed, Iraq War Crimes Exposed. I'll get the link and the actual name for you. So on the other side, I could tell you, and I'll drop the link in the chat room over on Federal Jack. So we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. I am sorry that it has come to this. A soldier's last words. Daniel Summers, the Iraq war veteran who inspired me to dive back into the Iraq war atrocities tonight, who inspired me to play the clip I just played for you, he killed himself. And he did so because of the things that he had witnessed, the things he was forced to partake in. He killed himself on June 10th of this year. 2 weeks ago. And for what? One more name to the list of people and lives wasted. For what? Ask yourself that. I'm going to read you his letter. It says, "I'm sorry it has come to this. The fact is, for as long as I can remember, my motivation for getting up every day has been so that you would not have to bury me. As things have continued to get worse, it has become clear that this alone is not a sufficient reason to carry on. The fact is, I'm not getting better. I'm not going to get better, and I will most certainly deteriorate further as time goes on. From a logical standpoint, it is better to simply end things quickly and let any repercussions from that play out in the short term than to drag things out into the long term. You will perhaps be sad for a time, but over time you will forget and begin to carry on. Far better that than to inflict my growing misery upon you for years and decades to come, dragging you down with me. It is because I love you that I cannot do this to you. You will come to see that it is a far better thing as one day after another passes, during which you do not have to worry about me or even give me a second thought. You will find that your world is better without me in it. I really have been trying to hang on for more than a decade now. Each day has become a testament to the extent to which I cared, suffering unspeakable horror as quietly as possible so that you could feel as though I was still here for you. In truth, I was nothing more than a prop, filling space so that my absence would not be noted. In truth, I've already been absent for a long, long time. My body has become nothing but a cage, a source of pain and constant problems. The illness I have has caused me pain that not even the strongest medicines could dull, and there is no cure. All day, every day, a screaming agony in every nerve ending in my body. It is nothing short of torture. My mind is a wasteland, filled with visions of incredible horror, unceasing depression, and crippling anxiety. Even with all the medications the doctors dare give. Simple things that everyone else takes for granted are nearly impossible for me. I cannot laugh or cry. I can barely leave the house. I derive no pleasure from any activity. Everything simply comes down to passing time until I can sleep again. Now to sleep forever seems the most logical, merciful thing. You must not blame yourself. The simple truth is this. During my first deployment, I was made to participate in things, the enormity of which is hard to describe. War crimes, crimes against humanity. Though I did not participate willingly and made what I thought was my best effort to stop these events, there are some things that a person simply cannot come back from. I take some pride in that, actually, as to move on in life after being part of such a thing would be the mark of a sociopath, in my mind. These things go far beyond what most are even aware of. To force me to do these things and then participate in the ensuing cover-up is more than any government has the right to demand. Then, the same government has turned around and abandoned me. They offer no help and actively block the pursuit of gaining outside help via their corrupt agents of the DEA. Any blame rests with them. Beyond that, there are the host of physical illnesses that have struck me down again and again, for which they also offer no help. There might be some progress by now if they had not spent nearly 20 years denying the illness that I and so many others were exposed to. And I will pause it right there and finish it up on the other side when we come back. Do not go anywhere. Alright, we are back. Continuing the letter. Beyond that, there are the host of physical illnesses that have struck me down again and again, for which they offer no help. There might be some progress by now if they had not spent nearly 20 years denying the illness that I and so many others were exposed to. Further complicating matters is the repeated and severe brain injuries to which I was subjected, which they also seem to be expanding no effort into understanding. What is known is that each of these should have been cause enough for immediate medical attention, which was not rendered. Lastly, the DEA enters the picture again, as they have now managed to create such a culture of fear in the medical community that doctors are too scared to even take the necessary steps to control the symptoms. All under the guise of a completely manufactured, quote, overprescribing epidemic, end quote, which stands in stark relief to all of the legitimate research, which shows the opposite to be true. Perhaps with the right medication, at the right doses, I could have bought a couple of decent years. But even that is too much to ask from a regime built upon the idea that suffering is noble and relief is just for the weak. However, when the challenges facing a person are likely so great that all but the weakest would give up, these extra factors are enough to push a person over the edge. Is it any wonder that the latest figures show 22 veterans killing themselves each day? That is more veterans than children killed at Sandy Hook every single day. Where are the huge policy initiatives? Why isn't the president standing with those families at the State of the Union? Perhaps because we were not killed by a single lunatic, but rather by his own system of dehumanization, neglect, and indifference. It leaves us to where all we have to look forward to is constant pain, misery, poverty, and dishonor. I assure you that when the numbers do finally drop, it will merely be because those who were pushed the farthest are already dead. And for what? Bush's religious lunacy? Cheney's ever-growing fortune? And that of his corporate friends? Is that what we destroy lives for? Since then, I have tried everything to fill the void. I tried to move into a position of greater power and influence to try and right some of the wrongs. I deployed again, where I put a huge emphasis on saving lives. The fact of the matter, though, is that any new lives saved do not replace those who were murdered. It is an exercise in futility. Then I pursued replacing destruction with creation. For a time this provided a distraction, but it could not last. The fact is that any kind of ordinary life is an insult to those who died at my hand. How can I possibly go around like everyone else while the widows and orphans I created continue to struggle? If they could see me sitting here in suburbia, in my comfortable home, working on some music project, they would be outraged, and rightfully so. I thought perhaps I could make some headway with this film project, maybe even directly appealing to those I had wronged and exposing a greater truth. But that is also now being taken away from me. I fear that, just as with everything else that requires the involvement of people who cannot understand by virtue of never having been there, it is going to fall apart as careers get in the way. The last thought that has occurred to me is one of some kind of final mission. It is true that I have found that I am capable of finding some kind of reprieve by doing things that are worthwhile on the scale of life and death. While it is a nice thought to consider doing some good with my skills, experience, and killer instinct, the truth is that it isn't realistic. First, there are the logistics of financing and equipping my own operation. Then there is the near certainty of a grisly death, international incidents, and being branded a terrorist in the media that would follow. What is really stopping me, though, is that I simply am too sick to be effective in the field anymore. That, too, has been taken from me. Thus, I am left with basically nothing. Too trapped in a war to be at peace. Too damaged to be at war. abandoned by those who would take the easy route, and a liability to those who stick it out and thus deserve better. So you see, not only am I better off dead, but the world is better off without me in it. This is what brought me to my actual final mission. Not suicide, but a mercy killing. I know how to kill, and I know how to do it so that there is no pain whatsoever. It was quick, and it did not suffer. And above all, now I am free. I feel no more pain. I have no more nightmares or flashbacks or hallucinations. I am no longer constantly depressed or afraid or worried. I am free. I ask that you be happy for me for that. It is perhaps the best break I could have hoped for. Please accept this and be glad for me. Daniel Summers. Pretty shocking to hear. Pretty deep. Nerve-rattling. Emotion-stirring. What could this young man have witnessed or taken part in that would have caused him such pain, such agony, that he would feel that the only way out would be to kill himself? What could he have, think about that for a minute, what could he have witnessed? What could he have seen? Put yourself in his shoes for a minute and think, what could you witness that could be so horrific that would make you feel the way he did? He just laid his soul out and told you exactly how he's feeling. Exactly why he did what he did. Why he ended his life the way he did. Think about that for a minute. Put yourself in his shoes and ask yourself, what do you think he witnessed? What do you think he was forced to partake in? Can you imagine? I bet you a lot of you can't. And I'm not picking on any of you when I say that, by the way. I'm not bashing anybody. But I'm willing to bet that a lot of you can't even imagine what it's like to go through what these men and women are experiencing. That's why he says, I was hoping to get this film project to expose some of this stuff, but it fell through because, ultimately, if you haven't been there, you don't understand, by virtue of not being there, you don't have that urge, that emotional attachment to what he's going through, so they don't understand how perhaps it wasn't as important to them as it was to him, and maybe he didn't convey that well enough, because there's always that gap, because they've been there and you haven't. You don't understand. If you haven't even been in the military, you don't understand. And if you haven't been through combat or anything like that, or you haven't been deployed somewhere or done, you can't understand it. You can't. There's no way to explain it. So this kid probably felt very alone. You could hear it in the way he wrote in that letter. He brings up a really good point. The VA, their medical attention with their care for vets who need it, it's ridiculous. And the reason why the VA will say, not just the DU, because I've said that's a Pandora's box. That when I interviewed Doug Rocky, and I've talked about it other times, but not only will they not admit about the vaccines and the DU and all that, but the reasons that they don't want to investigate a lot of these war crimes. I mean, this stuff's written down. There's all the reports. I'm sure some of the reports have been, the field reports maybe didn't make it in, but there are reports on record of this stuff. It's just buried and redacted and everything else. You'll never see them admit to this, because if they admit to it, it opens the door. It opens up Pandora's box for lawsuits, for everything under the sun that you could possibly connect to this. They could go after, from lawsuits to actually being rounded up for war crimes. Because, I mean, once you start going down that path, what happens if a lawyer wants to sue for an Iraqi family, and during the discovery process they discover a huge amount of war crimes, and that ends up being exposed as part of the lawsuit? Then what? Well, then now it goes from not only do they have to deal with the lawsuit aspect of it, but now they could possibly, because now there's war crimes, in a court of law being exposed. Well, that's a big problem. That's Pandora's box. You can't have that. That's why they turn vets away. I mean, there's also financial reasons and everything else too. I mean, hey, we can spend bazillions of dollars on equipment, but don't even bother taking care of the veterans. They're leaving a crap load of equipment over in Afghanistan now. They're scrapping all those MRAPs, the mine resistant vehicles. Remember those that were made specifically for Iraq and Afghanistan for roadside bombs and all that crap? Remember that? Yeah. They're $1 million a piece to build. I'll repeat that. $1 million a piece these things cost. $1 million a pop. And we're scrapping them for pennies on the dollar. We're literally, they have a private contractor out there breaking them up, cutting them up into scrap pieces, and selling them in Afghanistan, getting rid of the scrap. So where'd that $1 million go? You're taking $1 million vehicle that, well, it's been used in warfare for a couple of years now, and they're pretty beat up. You can't bring them back here and clean them down and cleanse them, and maybe take all the ammo and stuff, all the guns and all that stuff off of it, and all the important stuff that you guys wouldn't want anybody to get their hands on, like you did with the deuce and a halfs after Vietnam, and you can't sell them. You wouldn't bring them back here. Why not? Interesting. No, it costs too much to ship it back, so we'll just destroy it there. Well, they probably also don't want to ship it back because it's covered in depleted uranium. But of course, a lot of the stuff coming back there, and the soldiers are anyway, so it really doesn't matter. Clean up? What's clean up? They don't care. $1 million a piece for these things, the MRAPs, and they're scrapping them. Do you know how many veterans you could take care of with $1 million? Do you have any frigging idea? Do you? Disgusting. But hey, no, we don't overspend. We have a debt problem because, the old people, and because of the veterans, and because people that want food stamps, right? I mean, I'm not saying food stamps isn't causing it, they're blowing that whole program up because J.P. Morgan takes care of that whole thing. But come on, is it really old people that are causing the financial problems? Or do you think maybe it's spending $1 million a piece on these pieces of equipment, and how many thousands of them did we order? And then now they just dismantle them and sell them for scrap. Don't you think maybe that money could have gone elsewhere? Maybe take care of the people that are sick, physically and mentally, from the war. Maybe fix bridges that are falling down, roads, infrastructure. I don't know. We're going to break. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. War crimes happened. There is no doubt about it. They occurred. Okay? You cannot hide it. Can't take it away from what happened. It is what it is. They occurred. Now, the question is, do we own up to it? Do we stand around and sit here and go, no, it wasn't us. Or come up with all sorts of BS excuses to cover up why it happened or how it happened? Or that the fact that it even did happen? Or do we actually act like the country that we portray ourselves to be? See, this is a defining moment for us, ladies and gentlemen. If we actually stand up and admit that what we did was wrong, oh my God, we can't do that! We'll look like jerk-offs! Yeah, well, we are jerk-offs, and we should look like them. You see, you need to take responsibility. All of us do. Well, I didn't support it. I didn't agree with it. Did you do anything other than yell at your television or bitch to your neighbors or your friends? Well, no, I mean, what's one person going to do? Well, then you're part of the problem because you have that attitude. That's why this stuff goes on. So, yeah, you did help. I helped. I was in the military at the time. I was a cheerleader for this. Let's go and kill every one of them dumb Arabs. Yeah! And this was from somebody who actually had said in conversations, meaning me, I had said in conversations to people after 9/11, I fear we're going to go into Iraq over this. I just have this feeling. And they started blaming Iraq. I remember having a conversation with my mother about this, and I said, they're going to go into Iraq over this. I said, I don't have a problem going after the people that did this, but why are we going into Iraq? They had nothing to do with this. And then later on, because when you're in war, and that's the way the propaganda is, there was, for a brief period of time, I was a cheerleader for the invasion. I was an engineer when I was in the military, so I worked on equipment that went over there. I was proud to take part. Until I wasn't anymore. Because I only knew what was passed down to me. And I started hearing stories from my friends that were out, boots on the ground, guys that were coming back from Iraq. Because I had already gotten out by this point now. They were coming back and they were telling me, hey man, there's some, what you're hearing and what you're seeing on TV ain't really what's going down. So I started to do some research. Started to read a little bit. Started to read books that were written by people that were there on the ground, that experienced this stuff. One of the books actually was written by a guy that was embedded with a Marine unit, a man in that Marine unit later married Dr. Dahlia Wasfi, who's been a guest on my broadcast before. You're actually going to hear her speak in a few minutes. I'm going to play some audio from her about the invasion of Iraq. So I know that the information I read in those books is accurate because I've been able to thoroughly vet the information over like a 5 or 6 year period. It was a very different story than what I was told, what you were told, what the media presented to us. Iraq was not a just war. Drop that narrative from your head. Well, what about all those people we lost? We see, that's the problem. Everybody's looking at this emotionally because they realize, because it only takes a little bit of common sense and logic to see this, that if they're realizing that if this is all crap and that the Iraq war was based on lies, then that means that their friends, their family, their loved ones, their husbands, their wives, their sons, their daughters, their nephews, their nieces, they died in vain. That's emotionally upsetting. It pisses me off now knowing what I know now about all my friends that are gone. We need to get over that. Put the emotion to the side. Because we can make their deaths not in vain. If it leads to a positive change and ending this kind of behavior, then maybe their deaths won't be in vain. But if you don't stand up and don't say anything, then yes, their deaths are in vain. Educate yourself about the truth about what happened during the Iraq War. We're going to break. We'll be back with hour number 2 in just a few short seconds. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. I got some more audio for you, and then we will wrap it up with the Iraq War and move on to a few other things, including the Xbox One spying on you. That's right. your video game system is going to spy on you. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with our number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. It is June 24th, 2013, and you are listening to me live here on Unbound Radio. Go check out the website for the network. I rarely ever plug the network, and it's not that I don't like the network. I just forget to because I'm all about the information. I don't even plug my own website, FederalJack.com, rarely enough. But anyway, go check out Unbound. We have a great lineup here on the network. Just a bunch of great men and women here on the network. I am proud to say that I broadcast with and I work with. They are just a great bunch of guys and gals, and they all do good shows. They all bring unique perspectives to the table. So I just want to give everybody a big shout out and a big thank you for everything they do. Anyway, when we come back, I'm going to give everybody a warning now. I'm going to set the audio clip that I'm going to play up. Some of you may be used to this, but I, from time to time, have a tendency to play for the newer listeners. I have a tendency to play some shocking things from time to time. So when we come back from break, because we're going to break in about 2.5 minutes. When we come back, coming right out of the bumper music, I'm not even going to comment or speak. I'm going to let the audio play. Now, I warn you, if you have young kids in the room, you might want to make them get out. It's a piece I've played before a couple months back when I was discussing the Iraq War. And it has a soldier describing the rape of a young girl in Iraq who later hung herself. That's not what the whole piece is, but it's part of what's in there. So, and then you'll hear a puppy yelping. You can't see it. You have to see it in the video. But the puppy, I'm sure people have seen the video before. It was on Fox News and CNN and all this other stuff when it first came out years ago on YouTube. It's the video of the Marine chucking a puppy that they found off of the side of a cliff in Afghanistan, I think it was. Or no, I think it was Iraq. I guess it was Iraq because it wasn't. But he wherever they were by some area where they're up on a hill or whatever steep area, and they chuck the puppy off the side of the hill that they're on, and obviously the dog didn't die. So you'll hear that. You'll hear the dog whimpering, but it's some of what you're going to hear is pretty rough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, or I'm not going to edit it, because that would take away from the reality of what actually happened. That makes it politically correct, and it makes it easier for me to take. It's easier, Popeye, for me to accept. No. I don't want it to be easy. I want it to be a difficult pill to swallow. I want it to tear the sides of your throat up as you're trying to swallow it. I want it to be that piece of cereal that gets stuck in your throat and you're like, because I want you to remember it. If it's PC, you'll just go, oh, it's okay. Well, that's what happens. So when we come back, prepare yourself. There's a little bit of profanity. You're going to hear the F word a few times. Too bad. Deal with it. We're all adults. 59 seconds when we come back. The video's up on FederalJack.com. It's titled, "The Video the Pentagon Does Not Want You to See." Stay tuned.
Flags are bits of colored cloth that governments use first to shrink wrap people's brains and then as ceremonial shrouds to bury the dead.
The U.S. military as an institution is very corrupt and is built upon spreading death. To me, the idea of having a force like the U.S. Army participating in nation building is just asinine. I mean, we're nation destroyers. That's what we're trained to do.
We were all congratulated after we had our first kills. My company commander personally congratulated me. This is the same individual who has stated that whoever gets their first kill by stabbing them to death will get a 4-day pass when we return from Iraq.
I've heard numerous circumstances of civilians getting killed and then
Soldiers and Marines subsequently placing weapons on their bodies or placing wire on them.
Army Private First Class Lavina Johnson would have turned 23 this month, but 3 years ago, the African-American teenager from Missouri was found dead in Bladderau, just a few weeks short of her 20th birthday. Her body was found in a tent belonging to the private military contractor Kellogg Brown and Root. She'd abrasions all over her body, a broken nose, a black eye, burned hands, loose teeth, acid burns on her genitals, a bullet hole in her head. The Army labeled Lavina Johnson's death a suicide. They told her parents she died of self-inflicted non-combat injuries.
Say it again. Say again what happened.
Say what?
What was going on? What was like being a guard there?
Guard at Africa.
Yeah. That place, man. It's fucking world famous now.
As far as I'm concerned, they're all guilty. You know what? They should have kicked Saddam out themselves. Instead, we're there doing the fucking job. Fuck them, dude. Anyone with a fucking rag on their head is very girl. She's probably like 15 years old.
See it, right?
I hadn't been touched yet. She was fucking prime.
Oh.
So, guys, he started pimping around for $50 a shot. I think at the end of the day, he made like $500 before she hung herself. Really?
4 soldiers walked through the trees and approached this house. Here, according to specialist James Barker's statement, he and another soldier took it in turns to rape the 14-year-old girl. In another room, the girl's parents and 5-year-old sister were shot dead.
Barker's statement said after Green had killed the 2 adults and the little girl, he came into the room where the teenager was being sexually assaulted. He had an AK-47 rifle in his hand. He said, "They're all dead. I killed them." He put the weapon down, raped the 14-year-old, and then shot her dead too.
Before they left, they poured kerosene over the girl's body and set it alight. They returned to their checkpoint, and Barker said he grilled some chicken wings.
4 years ago, at the age of 19, Ms. Jamie Lee Jones signed a contract to become an employee of KBR, then a Halliburton subsidiary. Ms. Jones arrived in Iraq in July of 2005 and was housed in barracks with 400 men and only a few women. 4 days after her arrival, Ms. Jones was drugged and gang raped. After Ms. Jones reported the rape to her supervisors, she was locked in a shipping container with an armed guard and prohibited any contact with the outside world. They locked her in a container.
According to the Center for Defense Information, 51% of your federal income taxes go specifically to military spending, not healthcare or education, but war.
Too cute, little puppy. Come on,
we're almost there.
That's fucked up.
Why was her child one of an increasing number born with deformities since the war, like this? Massive growth which was rapidly spreading across the little girl's face. Case after case of differing deformities without any real explanation, except their parents' suspicions that the deformities were caused by chemicals such as white phosphorus used by the Americans during the war.
A Geiger counter will give a reading of between 5 and 15 pulses per minute in a typical environment. This depleted uranium round will trigger 10,000 pulses in about 40 seconds. This type of ammunition is radioactive because it is made of nuclear waste referred to as uranium-238 or depleted uranium. This material is left over from the processing of uranium-234 used for atomic bombs and uranium-235 used in nuclear power plants. Uranium-238 remains radioactive for 4.5 billion years, and its toxicity reveals itself as soon as particles are inhaled or ingested. Cancer and birth defects are the most common side effects.
we have an obligation to every last victim of this illegal aggression because all of this carnage has been done in our name. Since World War II, 90% of the casualties of war are unarmed civilians, a third of them children. Our victims have done nothing to us. From Palestine to Afghanistan to Iraq to Somalia to wherever our next target may be, their murders are not collateral damage. They are the nature of modern warfare. They don't hate us because of our freedoms. They hate us because every day we are funding and committing crimes against humanity. The so-called war on terror is a cover for our military aggression to gain control of the resources of Western Asia. This is sending the poor of this country to kill the poor of those Muslim countries. This is trading blood for oil. This is genocide, and to most of the world, we are the terrorists. In these times, remaining silent on our responsibility to the world and its future is criminal. And in light of our complicity in the supreme crimes against humanity in Iraq and Afghanistan and ongoing violations of the UN Charter and international law, how dare any American criticize the actions of legitimate resistance to illegal occupation? Our so-called enemies in Afghanistan, Iraq, Palestine, our other colonies around the world, and our inner cities here at home are struggling against the oppressive hand of empire, demanding respect for their humanity. They are labeled insurgents or terrorists for resisting rape and pillage by the white establishment, but they are our brothers and sisters in the struggle for justice. The civilians at the other end of our weapons don't have a choice, but American soldiers have choices. And while there may have been some doubt 5 years ago, today we know the truth. Our soldiers don't sacrifice for duty, honor, country. They sacrifice for Kellogg, Brown, and Root. They don't fight for America. They fight for their lives and their buddies beside them because we put them in a war zone. They're not defending our freedoms. They're laying the foundation for 14 permanent military bases to defend the freedoms of ExxonMobil and British Petroleum. They're not establishing democracy. They're establishing the basis for an economic occupation to continue after the military occupation has ended. Iraqi society today, thanks to American help, is defined by house raids, death squads, checkpoints, detentions, curfews, blood in the streets, and constant violence. We must dare to speak out in support of the Iraqi people who resist and endure the horrific existence we brought upon them through our bloodthirsty imperial crusade. We must dare to speak out in support of those American war resistors, the real military heroes who uphold their oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, including those terrorist cells in Washington, D.C., more commonly known as the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Frederick Douglass said, "Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are people who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the roar of its many waters." The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both, but it must be a struggle. Power conceives nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. Every one of us must keep demanding, keep fighting, keep thundering, keep plowing, keep speaking, keep struggling until justice is served. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. If we do not acknowledge what we have done, then all those people's deaths will be in vain. We can at least find a silver lining. See, that's the problem with things like this. People will look at a situation like this and say, well, okay, Popeye, we were wrong. But all those lives lost, all that money spent, there has to be some good to come out of it, you know. And because they want that, they need that, they'll accept the justification for this, that, oh, well, we brought them democracy. Some people think Iraq was involved with 9/11. Saddam Hussein funded Al-Qaeda. Really? You should really see who funds Al-Qaeda. You do. Every time you get your paycheck and you have the income tax taken out. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Nada. Zero. Zilch. Well, he could have funded them, right? Why would he fund the CIA to lead on a which would set off on a crusade the United States military, which would lead to his front door? Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. I don't know if you can sense the sarcasm in there. We need to admit that what happened was wrong. The war was wrong. The deaths that resulted from it, all of them, were needless and senseless. Well, they were killing our boys over there. Okay, well, if the Chinese invaded the United States, how would you react? You tell me if you'd sit on the sidelines and drink your beer. Them damn Chinese are coming down the street again. Guzzle, guzzle, guzzle. Or would you be behind a friggin' tree with an AR-15, not allowing them to get that far down the street, forcing them to dismount their vehicles 500-600 feet further down the road because of the incoming fire? Oh, I don't know. Maybe some people out there would probably sit in their chairs. Damn Chinese, they're raiding. Rah. But more than half of the people, I would say, would eventually stand up, because if you watched, even if you didn't stand up in the initial invasion, if you watched your family get killed, maybe your house got raided at 3 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden all the males in your house got rounded up and they went to a prison and never came back. Or they just shot them because they were afraid of them. So they rounded all the men up and shot them and then left. Or they shoot the mother in front of the kids. Or they dropped a bomb on the family. Or whatever the case may be. Well, Iraq had problems. Let me tell you what, Iraq certainly did not have the problems that it's got to this day, and that it's had since we invaded. They didn't have car bombings and terrorism problems in Saddam's Iraq. You should go do your research. I'm not saying Saddam was, a sit-down guy. Hey, let's go chill with Saddam and sit down with him and have a couple of beers. He wasn't that kind of guy. Maybe with some of the people he was tight with, but I'm not saying that he wasn't a dictator in his own right. But people need to learn. They didn't have Al-Qaeda in Iraq until we came there. So this has all been for nothing, okay? It's not what you've been told for. There is no justification. Stop trying to, it happened, so we need to make it, justified. No! No justification. Let's just deal with that, and then we can move on. Right back. Don't go anywhere. All right, here's how it's going to go. We got a short segment here. So I'm going to switch gears, not too much, because I'm still going to be talking about war and stuff here for a second. When we come back in, on the other side of the break, because it's only about 5 minutes and we'll have a break coming up again. When we come back into that long segment, I'm going to play the last clip in relation to the Iraq War that I want to play for you all, and I'm sure most of you have heard it by now, but I'm going to play it again just because. It's titled, Just Who Were We Fighting in Iraq? Pay close attention to the audio, because it was made by the quote-unquote insurgents back in 2005. I wonder why they didn't want you, the individual, the free-thinking individual, to see these videos. That's why they labeled all the websites that housed them terrorist-supporting websites, and they took them down. So coming back in from break, I'll pick it up as soon as the music starts to fade down. I'll pick it up, because I wanted to do it in a nice long break segment so that it doesn't. I don't have to cut the audio up into two pieces, so that you get the full context of the audio in one shot. So coming in from break, next segment, that's what we're going to be going on to. But there were two other things I wanted to talk about tonight. There was the Xbox spying thing, which that'll be the final segment. I'll talk about that. But the other thing that kind of coincides with the war in Iraq and war in general, Syria, the war going on in Syria. find it ironic, by the way, that we're arming the rebels in Syria, yet the rebels that were fighting against us in Iraq were called terrorists and insurgents. So they're only insurgents and terrorists when they're fighting us. When they're fighting anybody else, they're freedom fighters and rebels. Isn't it interesting how the name changes? Anyway, this is something that I've been monitoring, and this is actually from Vessel Finder, which is it's about shipping and all the vessels pretty much in the world. You can go check it out, vesselfinder.com. But this isn't like some fake faux news website, not some guy sitting in his basement. You can't. I've been monitoring this, and this story is apparently real. But our media is hush on it. Not one word. Apparently, a huge container ship, which these things don't do this, okay? But this is not, they're designed to not do this, but this huge container ship going from Singapore to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, yeah, going from Singapore to Jeddah was bringing, apparently, it had arms destined for the rebels in Syria. And at some point, out in the middle of the ocean there, along its trip, the ship busted in half. Now, this is a large container ship. If you live in the States and you're listening, even if you live in another country, if you live near a port, you've probably seen these. But if you're in the States, if you live anywhere near, like if you're in Florida, if you live anywhere near any of the ports of Florida, you've seen these things cruising around in and out of port. The huge, huge cargo ships, the big-ass container ships, the kind where they have the containers, the 43-foot trailers, the ones that you'd see on the back, or excuse me, the 48-foot trailers, the ones that you'd see on the, like roaming around on a tractor trailer. And then they have, a couple hundred stacked all over the decks, not to mention whatever's below decks, right? This thing just cracks in half. These ships don't do that. They're made not to do that. Okay? This is really a big kind of surprise that this happened. Ship was called the MOL Comfort. It busted in two pieces and sank. I mean, that's I know some of these vessels, they have faults here and there, and I'm sure, well, maybe this is one of those coinky-dinks that this thing busted in half. This never happened before. I just think it's a little odd that this thing broke in half, and it was carrying arms, supposedly, for the Syrian rebels. Now, if it wasn't carrying arms, right, if there's no merit to the idea that it was carrying arms for the Syrian rebels, let me ask you something. If there's no merit to this, why? I mean, there's pictures of the ship, okay, busted in two. But if there's no merit to the vessel carrying weapons, then how come the mainstream media hasn't talked about it? Because this is the first time one of these container ships split in half like this and then sinks. Wonder if there was maybe, I don't know, a hand behind it that didn't want the rebels to get those weapons? The quote-unquote rebels? I don't know. It's a little shady. Go look it up. Anyway, we'll be right back. We'll come back in from break. Just who were we fighting in Iraq? Stay tuned and make close attention, ladies and gentlemen. The audio is going to shock you.
People of America, we wish to share with you our thoughts on the events we experienced, as well as what the future may bear. And despite the madness we have endured and still, we see no harm in presenting you with the criminal nature of your newly re-elected emperor. Despite our belief that the elections were flawed, we know now that when there is a close tie between the candidates, there is something wrong. Some in our ranks believe that any candidate from any side of the spectrum are two faces of the same coin. You, the people, have said your word in what is claimed to be a democracy, and thus have chosen a leader who claims to represent your vision. It is your right to lead the world, as it is the right of any nation which chooses to do so. Yet this does not allow you to conquer others. There is a belief of a large number of our people that a lot of the facts do not reach you, facts that may be classified as unsuitable for the general public, facts that are twisted to gain a positive image here or there. Nothing new to an emperor who represents deception, lies, crimes, half-victories, and total defeats. Your administration, time after time, lied and presented you with achievements directed by Hollywood and performed in Iraq. You have elected these criminals, and thus you are responsible for their actions. We hope that your future decisions will be based on reason and belief, for your emperor tomorrow will mirror the image of America to the world, and by his actions will your empire be measured. And for the first time in history, a mafia of the weapons plants represented by Bush, oil companies represented by Dick Cheney, and the Zionists represented by Paul Wolfowitz and Richard Pearl hijacked the United States of America in an ingenious plan to control the world. This type of administration is exactly what Benjamin Franklin once warned of. By weakness and ignorance, you have allowed this gang of criminals to hijack your country, create a new phobia to recruit those whom they regard as nothing but fuel and vehicles to their master plan. This administration will enforce on you, just as it tries to enforce on our people, new laws that will result in a police state similar to those of your consecutive governments back in our region. Legislation will soon be drafted by the appointed puppets to allow foreign ownership of land and structure, and soon our people will be the foreigners on the land of their forefathers. This new world order will enslave people of all religions and race, and soon your children, as well as ours, if they survive, will truly live in a planet of apes. And with a reduced population for ease of control, this can only be the implementation of a plan once presented by Henry Kissinger. This world has not yet seen an empire which constitutes in its prime objectives the destruction and genocide of whole populations and societies, only to control the energy resources of this planet. Your representatives and their media have portrayed an image that an insurgency is in effect, and that it is led by elements of foreign fighters entering from Syria and neighboring countries. Yet we assure you, this is only a continuation of what Bush once claimed, mission accomplished. This resistance movement was prepared for, and is only the second chapter of this war, and we are mostly, if not all Iraqis, proud Iraqis, who kept their oaths to defend people and country. And because this war may last longer than what the invaders anticipated, we have all promised to make their stay long, costly, and painful. Blaming other countries is nothing but creating new pretexts to invade other sovereign states and back future expeditions. They have made our country a battlefield to settle accounts with elements of Al-Qaeda, formerly dear allies and partners. They have also created new phobias to justify their continued presence, despite their loss of this war. And for the general media, we call on them to think about what they declare and not fear death and imprisonment. Do not fall into the traps prepared by those who pull the strings from Tel Aviv. As for the declared casualties, this is an epic on its own. We assure you that the figures are far higher than they declare. It is not a secret today in Iraq what we call the green card soldiers. Young men from South America and other parts of the world gathered and promised the US citizenship and large sums of cash for their mercenary services in Iraq. They are always on the front lines, and their casualty figures are never declared. They are hidden in unmarked graves and dumped into rivers under the cover of moonless nights, some of which the resistance have provided evidence of. There are also a large number of security contractors who are not listed as military personnel. To us, it is one thing to be tricked into this war, but it is totally different to come here and fight someone else's war. After the failed American elections in Iraq, they will now play the sectarian card. They are already sending their mercenaries to destroy churches and mosques alike in order to prepare the ground for civil war. They will train more and more local traitors to conduct police operations and detention raids on anyone who does not accept democracy, performed at the muzzle of a barrel. The local mercenaries will also act as sandbags to their masters when we choose to strike. The non-conduct of your troops has also taken its toll on our people. It has created resentment and disgust. They dismiss these war crimes as isolated cases, yet the figures are always on the rise. What's more are scandals of Abu Ghraib, poker, and the use of chemical weapons on Fallujah, and only God knows what's to come. Life under dictatorship is far more safer than behind the bars of your democracy. Have you not asked yourselves, where are the weapons of mass destruction? And where are the links between our previous government and the once CIA-sponsored Al-Qaeda? Or is that all now a thing of the past? What happened to the thousands of people who died and continue to die of cancer? Women who give birth to deformed babies, caused by the effect of your military's depleted uranium shells. Since 1990, thousands on both sides of the conflict have suffered unknown illnesses. Many have died since then, and others lack medical attention. Large parts of Iraq will be radioactive for millions of years to come. And if we were to return this radiating material to the US and Britain, we would be no different than those who use them. May we ask you, why do you think the British government decided to set foot only in the areas of the South, where the resistance is still partially active? They have left the difficult areas for your boys to suffer. This deal was accepted by your government, only to form a purely cosmetic alliance with a nation that still strives for the glory of its imperial past. They have turned the land of the free into a camp of capitalist slavery, and then changed the home of the brave into a printing house for papers they call dollars, and guarded it with enormous military might. This administration, which claims that you have re-elected, has brought on more humiliation and insults to each and every one of you than any other government in your short yet tremendous history. And as odd as it may seem, we advise you to take matters in your own hands and rid this world of such criminals, or any form of government which resembles the neocons in their aims. Form a third party if need be. Appoint those who resist preemptive war as true representatives of the people before it is too late. And if demonstrations and protests are not heard, use and protect what is left of your constitution and correct matters by force. This world awaits your move. Today these words may seem strange, but we believe that a nation which once gave the world John F. Kennedy, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Hughes and Henry Ford will not fall short of giving true leaders of substance and dignity. This war has taught us that one man on the field can change the outcome of a day. One man who believes in true freedom can do what nations put together dare think of. We share these thoughts with great honesty to those of you who spent days and nights trying to prevent this war, timeless efforts to prevent this real Holocaust. To all of you we say, thank you for your time.
How many terrorists thank the people that tried to stop the wanton slaughter in Iraq before it even started? How many big, bad, scary terrorists say thank you? Oh, it's just propaganda. Don't fall for it, Popeye. Okay. You're going to talk about the New World Order. You're going to talk about the Federal Reserve. That video was put together in 2005. Gee, I wonder if maybe they were onto something, Educate yourself about what really happened in Iraq. This broadcast couldn't do it in 2 hours. I couldn't do it in 4 hours. It's going to take you some time. Go in my archives. I've done probably, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be 5. Dr. Dahlia Wasfi. At least 6 in-depth broadcasts on this. Well, more. 9, 10, about 10 at least I can think of off the top of my head right now. I'm counting in my head. Go over to federaljack.com. Go to the archive section there. Federaljack.com archive section. And you can look them up. Or if you go to the download section, the downloadable info vault there, you click the link right in the front page. And it'll open up right at the top is the Down the Rabbit Hole archive, downloadable archive link. You can just click it and it'll open up the page where you can download the older broadcasts. And also on that page, if you scroll down to the bottom, is the Reality of War downloadable archive page. You click that link That'll open up a separate directory listing page, and you'll be able to download everything that I've played tonight, all the audio I've played tonight, plus a ton more. Iraq Veterans Against the War testimonies, stuff that you have to see for yourselves. Videos that were shot on the ground there in Iraq. Videos of what a real firefight looks like, so maybe you can get a little bit better of an understanding of what these veterans that have been there and come back, why they are the way they are, why they're experiencing the things that they experience. Still doesn't make up for the the you not being there and experiencing the same thing at the same time, but perhaps if you could at least get a better understanding, it'll help bridge that gap instead of leaving it wide open. That's part of the reason why a lot of vets kill themselves, is because they feel so alone. They feel that nobody understands them. Trust me, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to feel all by yourself, and that your family doesn't understand you and how you are when you come home from serving in the military. Trust me. Because the civilian world is drastically different, and when you come back to it, it's rough. And then, it's rough for somebody even if they were serving stateside and they were just living on different military installations. It's a rough transition. Even if they were on military bases throughout the world, but not in combat, it's rough. Now, picture what happens to somebody who's been through not one tour of combat, not 2 combat tours, but 4, 5, 8, in some cases 13, 14. Am I kidding? What do you think that does? So maybe to help you understand a little bit better, to help you, at least to help bridge that gap, you can go to that download section and you can at least see the reality of war. So go over to the federaljack.com downloadable archive section. It's right on the front page, actually. Just go to federaljack.com. Right next to the slider there with the images that move, you'll see a widget. It says Federal Jack downloadable info vault. And there's a little vault door. Just click it and it'll open up the download page. And then right at the top is the Down the Rabbit Hole archives. You can click that. Again, that'll open up the downloadable archive section for all my older shows. And then you can click on the Reality of War section. Do some homework. Download the video, download the videos and stuff, but download all the audio from my older shows too. Put it on a USB stick, listen to it in your newer cars. Well, the new cars have that USB stick feature. Drive around and educate yourself. All right, we're going to break. Stay tuned. Final segment coming up. Xbox One spying on you. Don't go anywhere. So you're going to buy an Xbox One, and then the Xbox One is going to watch you and listen to you and monitor you. Oh, Popeye, you're being a kooky conspiracy theorist. What is wrong with you, you kooky nut job? Yeah, except it's exactly what's going on. In fact, the revelations of this have caused such an uproar. Apparently, if you go to, I don't know if it's Xbox's Facebook page or Microsoft's, one of the two. I forget which one it is, but probably Xbox. I'm assuming they would have a page for the Xbox alone. But anyway, I'm sure even on Microsoft's page. But from what I understand, they're getting slammed with messages and comments of just, you people are morons for doing this, blah, 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 blah. Apparently, and I'm going to read a little bit of an article from Vigilant Citizen. Great website. I often use it as a reference, as you listeners, longtime listeners know, vigilantcitizen.com. But apparently this thing's got the Kinect built into it. Like the Kinect on the 360 right now, it's an added option. You can unplug it because they have the little USB plugs or whatever, however it plugs in. That's not the case with this thing. The Xbox One just won't work without it. And then even when the console is off, the microphone and the camera are constantly on. And the camera can see in the dark, and it can map the room. I don't know if the long-time listeners will remember this. The newer ones probably won't. But A long time ago, I talked about, there's a video, you can find it on YouTube, where these guys took two of the kayaks when they came out, and they put them back to back, and they were able to, spinning them around, they were able to map an entire room in 3D with it. Yeah, that's real nice. So, this thing is going to sit, now this is the newer, that was a couple years ago, this is the newer generation of processors and cameras and stuff in this thing, so Lord only knows. So, over on VigilantCitizen.com, the article is titled, "The new Xbox One will be a, quote, monitoring device under the guise of a gaming console," end quote. I remember when video games were about getting Mario to save the princess, and when you were done, the console would leave you the hell alone. The new Xbox One apparently wants to put an end to those days by turning the beloved game console into a 24/7 surveillance device. The Xbox One will bundle the Kinect, which is the camera, and it does the it can watch your body movements because it's supposed to work with different games for that, and it also does facial recognition. I told you it can also map a room in 3D. Anyway, it'll bundle the Kinect, a device that captures motion and sound, with every console, and its camera and mic will always be on by default. In fact, Xbox One will actually refuse to work if the Kinect is not connected to it. So the camera and mic will work even when the console is turned off. And the camera will even work in the dark. It's able to read your facial expressions and count the number of people in the room with you. In fact, and then he puts in quotes, there are also talks of charging pay-per-view movies per person in the room. So I don't watch that crap pay-per-view. I'll wait till it comes out on Netflix. And if not, I don't watch it, because I have better things to do than waste my time with mindless entertainment when I could actually be educating myself with, I don't know, a book, perhaps? Maybe listening to a good radio show, perhaps? Anyway. So the new Xbox One, and from what I understand, by the way, an update to that, from what I understand, I also heard that because the outrage was so great that I think the option to turn the camera and the mic off is now going to be put in there. I don't know if it's going to be, locked on 24/7, but I don't know the full details. When it gets a little bit closer to actually, because I don't think it's out yet, when it gets a little bit closer to this thing coming out on the market, and it's just the finalized product, I'll go over this again. But it just goes to show you, I mean, even if they reluctantly go back and they give you the option to turn it on or off. The point is, they didn't want to. And it's supposed to be a video game. Who remembers Nintendo or Pong? I remember Pong. I'm old. I remember when Pong came out. Pong didn't spy on you. Intellivision didn't spy on you. The Atari 2600 did not spy on you. If you had a Jaguar, a Sega Genesis, whatever, that crap didn't spy on you. TurboGrafx 16, none of that stuff did. Nintendo, Game Boy, all that crap. Now the thing watches you. Billy, you have 6 people in the room. You said you only had 5. That is a no-no. All of a sudden the laser beam comes out of your Xbox and phases one of the 5 people in the room out. I mean, is that where it's going to go? I know it's, going on the far end of the spectrum, but hey. Realistically, this thing, at the least, it's a 24/7 surveillance device sending the information to God knows who, God knows where. Think about that. Stop playing video games. Start to read books again. Educate yourself. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. I'll see you all again live tomorrow night. Look up that cargo ship sinking, too. Tell me that's not shady. Look into this stuff. Don't buy any of the mainstream stories on any of it. I'll see you all again tomorrow night. Love you all.